So this is going to look at biological rhythms. Now, there are three different rhythms. You've got circadian rhythms, infradian rhythms, and ultradian rhythms. And then to follow on from rhythms, you've got pacemakers and Zeitgebers, and they'll come on a separate presentation. So you've got these three biological rhythms, circadian, infradian, and ultradian. You need to know the difference between the three. You need to know some research for each of the three. You need to be able to describe and evaluate the three separately. You could get a 16-mark question on rhythms altogether. You could get a 16-mark question on just circadian rhythms. You could get a 16-mark question on infradian and ultradian. I've yet to see a question where the last two are asked about separately as a 16-mark because there's not that much to write about. Now, biological rhythms are kind of cyclical rhythms or changes that are influenced by two things. They're influenced by pacemakers or EPs, and they're influenced by Zeitgebers or EZs. So we'll come to those later on. But the main pacemaker that we look at is the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and the main Zeitgeber we look at is light. But biological rhythms are like cyclical rhythms within an organism, usually controlled by pacemakers and Zeitgebers. So pacemaker is an inside thing and a Zeitgeber is an outside thing. The three types of rhythm that you need to know are different because of the length of the rhythm. So that's why there's a difference. It's to do with their length. So you have, first of all, circadian rhythms. So circadian rhythms take 24 hours. And the circadian rhythm we will look at is the sleep-wake cycle. Ultradian rhythms take less than 24 hours. So that is stages of sleep. And infradian rhythms take longer than 24 hours. And the one we'll look at is the menstrual cycle. We'll also look at seasonal affective disorder. So you could be asked in an exam for 2 marks to define circadian, ultradian, or infradian rhythms. In your definition, state the length and then give an example of that type of rhythm. So circadian rhythms take 24 hours. So the rhythm we look at is the sleep-wake cycle. So within 24 hours, we are asleep for part of that, and we are awake for another part of that. That is influenced by light. So that's our EZ, and that's influenced by our kind of internal body clocks, which is our EPs. There is evidence to suggest that our body kind of free runs to a cycle of 24 to 25 hours. So without any external influence, our body works on a 24 to 25 hour cycle anyway. This free running has been tested. We'll look at an experiment, a case study of Michel Siffre, who went in a cave. There's also a Good Horizon program on kind of looking at your body clock, where a man goes in an underground bunker and tries to reset or kind of free run his circadian rhythm. Our sleep-wake cycle is controlled by the SCN, which is a part of our brain that receives information from light through the optic chiasm. So the sleep-wake cycle in humans, the pacemaker, the inside thing that controls our sleep-wake cycle, is called the SCN. And this receives information from outside. It receives light information. And what light does is it resets our sleep-wake cycle, or entrains it. Sometimes you'll see the word entrain instead of reset. It means the same thing in this case. In terms of the sleep-wake cycle, what happens is when the SCN detects light, it produces serotonin and suppresses the production of melatonin, and that wakes us up. When the SCN does not detect any light, so when it's dark, it stimulates the pineal gland to produce melatonin, and melatonin makes us sleepy. So our sleep-wake cycle is regulated really by the amount of melatonin that's in our bodies. Melatonin is produced when it's dark. That's why we tend to get sleepy when it is dark. So melatonin and serotonin kind of work against, they're antagonistic, they work against each other. So melatonin is produced when it's dark. It helps us sleep. It is impossible or very, very difficult to sleep without production of melatonin. So that's why you might feel sleepy if you go to the cinema. It might feel sleepy if you're in a dark room. It's because your body starts to produce melatonin. The pineal gland starts to produce melatonin because it's dark outside. A lack of melatonin can stop you sleeping, and it can cause insomnia as well. So this is the green structure, the little green structure is the SCN, so that's that suprachiasmatic nucleus. The purple structure is the pineal gland, that's what produces melatonin. So what's happening is light enters the eye, a light signal travels to the SCN. The SCN then can send messages to the pineal gland to either secrete or decrease the amount of melatonin. When there's low light, melatonin is increased, and then that makes us sleepy. So the SCN is our main pacemaker, our main EP, and that's how it regulates sleep on our circadian rhythm. Damage to the SCN can cause damage or changes to your sleeping patterns. This is a kind of roughly melatonin through a 24-hour cycle. You'll see there's an increased amount of melatonin when you're asleep and a lower amount of melatonin when you are awake. This again just demonstrates how the SCN works. We have other circadian rhythms as well. So there's certain types of the day where we are more alert. There's certain types of the day where we are more coordinated. Certain types of the day where our body temperature and our blood pressure are highest. These also count as circadian rhythms because they're rhythms that last for 24 hours. Body temperature can also affect our sleep-wake cycle. It tends to fluctuate in the day. When we go to sleep, our body temperature lowers, and that's what helps us feel sleepy. And also, we have a slight, what we call a circadian trough, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where you have a little dip in body temperature, and that's why you can feel a bit sleepy at 3 in the afternoon. This is one of the reasons why people that are having trouble sleeping, it's recommended that you take a hot bath. It's not the bath that makes you sleepy, it's the fact that once you come out of the bath, your body temperature dips, and it's the dip in body temperature that's meant to make you a bit sleepy. So this guy here is Michel Cifra. He did an experiment where he wanted to see if he could free run his body clock without any influence of light. So he went to live in a cave for 6 months. If you look at the actual presentation, you'll be able to watch the video on it. There's also been research by Ashcroft and Weaver and Sessler and Foucault as well. So you can look at all that from the PowerPoint. So Cifra supports, is evidence to support circadian rhythms. So this is just a bit of information about what he did. So he wanted to, he wanted to free run his body clock. He did this a few times. There's some good videos that you can watch on Cifra. He found that his body clock kind of worked at about 25 hours. There is an argument that he did have some blue wavelength light in the cave, so it didn't necessarily have as high control as he thought. There's also a study by Ashcroft and Weaver in a World War II bunker where people were looking to see whether they could free run their circadian rhythms. What the studies seem to suggest is that our circadian rhythm will free run to roughly the same cycle that it does, even without the presence of light. However, light tends to reset our clock to a 24-hour one. However, there's methodological problems with a lot of this research. A lot of artificial light influences the results as well. There's also research into body temperature. You can use this as your AO3 for circadian rhythms as well. And if you're evaluating and you need to have some issues and debates in there, it's scientific. You can talk about biological determinism or biological reductionism if you would like. These are just some examples of how you might use biological reductionism and biological determinism. Remember, do not get them mixed up. They are not the same thing. Okay, the next rhythm is an infradian rhythm. So this is a rhythm that lasts for longer than 24 hours. So the easiest rhythm to talk about here is the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle is regulated by hormones, so FSH and LH, it is the easiest cycle to talk about in an exam. You could talk about seasonal affective disorder, but there's easier research to learn on the menstrual cycle as your example of an infradian rhythm. That research is here, and it's very, very odd, and it's by McClintock, and it's about the fact that the menstrual cycle, according to McClintock, is not just influenced by pacemakers, so not just influenced by internal things, so by individual hormone levels. The menstrual cycle is also influenced by external things, so pheromones of other women. So what McClintock did was he managed to manipulate the length of the menstrual cycles of women by making them smell cotton wool pads that had been under the arms of other women, and could adjust women's menstrual cycles by up to 2 weeks. There are obviously methodological problems with this, but it's a study that's interesting and it's good to use in an exam. This suggests that there is an evolutionary basis of the menstrual cycle. All the cave women can get pregnant at the same time, so there's kind of safety in numbers in terms of kind of looking after children. It's an adaptive strategy. However, there's methodological problems with McClintock's work. You can talk about seasonal affective disorder, so it is on here. I would recommend using the menstrual cycle as your example of an infradian rhythm. So the third type of rhythm is your ultradian rhythm, or the sleep cycle. There are 5 stages of sleep. So you've got stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and REM. REM stands for rapid eye movement. That's where you dream. The other 4 stages are technically called NREM, so non-REM. That's where you do not dream. Your stages of sleep are roughly as in the diagram on the left. You start off by going into light sleep, so that's stage 1, and then your sleep gets deeper, so going into stage 4. You then come back up to light sleep, where you dream a little bit, so you go into REM sleep, and then you go back down what they call the sleep staircase, into slow wave sleep, into deep sleep, and then kind of come back up into light sleep as the night goes on. Each cycle within the sleep stages tends to last about 90 minutes, and your periods of REM become longer as the night goes on until you eventually awake. So this is kind of a typical sleep cycle. You can kind of track this nowadays if you've got a Fitbit or a phone or something that tells you about your sleep, so you'll be able to see, you can see how you sleep and kind of how your sleep cycle works. Each stage of sleep has different wavelengths, and it is kind of a different depth. REM sleep is where you dream. We know this because we can monitor people with an EEG, and we can tell what stage of sleep they are in. There's lots of research on this that supports the idea that the sleep staircase is like this, and this is the stages that we sleep in. There's also an ultradian rhythm called BRAC, so the basic rest activity cycle, which again is a 90-minute cycle. So there's this idea that within our bodies, we tend to work on these kind of smaller 90-minute cycles. Research to support the idea of stages of sleep come from Dement and Kleitman. This is where sleep patterns of a small amount of patients were monitored, and they were asked if they could recall their dreams. They'd asked how long they'd been dreaming for, and so on. But there's a clear conclusion, that REM sleep is associated with dreaming, and you can read a bit more on that if you like. There's also research on this basic rest activity cycle. So Erickson did some research into violinists to give support for this further 90-minute cycle in our bodies.